If as a leader or as a coach, I am getting into a team or into an organization which is well, I mean, in terms of strongly into a place where it's more of a command and control kind of a situation. And if I, as a coach or as a leader, if I want to, get everyone from that way of operating to more of, realizing that self-managing can work in this setup, how do you think what should be the starting point for this person to begin from? Maybe any quick things on that.
Well, I can share some ideas that I've developed over the years with others. Um, the leader has to have at least enough willingness and courage to embrace the idea of exploring different ways of working. If you don't have that, how do you even start, right?
If we have to say measure the success of self-managing teams, so how we measure the success of this self-management teams or maybe the organizations in general?
Yeah, so I think the measures are pretty straightforward and simple at MorningStar. Continuous measures of trust. As we talked earlier, that's a huge factor in business performance, and we think it's really important to the success of self-management. Any organization can measure trust.
As Scrum Masters, one of our core responsibilities is to enable self-management within teams. But we all get stuck as in where to begin with this. Did you know self-management is not just a concept in books, and there exists an organization that fully operates on self-management? Yes, you heard me right. Morningstar organization, the tomato manufacturing company, works successfully on self-management and has set example for the rest of the organizations to follow. So for today's episode, we have a special guest, Doug Kirkpatrick, who was one of the core members and pioneers in Morningstar who started implementation of self-management. Today's episode is a case study of Morningstar on self-management. So to talk more about Doug, Doug is not your average consultant. He's a TEDx speaker, author of 3 bestsellers, and founder of DRT Advisors, helping companies embrace the future of work. He spent his early career at Morningstar, then went on to co-create the future of management within other innovative organizations. Get ready for insights, practical tips, and a glimpse into a world where employees call the shots. So without much ado, let's welcome Doug.
Hello, Doug. Welcome to the podcast by Agile Coaching Roundtable. It's a great pleasure having you on our show. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know it's very early in the morning for you, but you took out some time for us, and you are doing this recording early your morning. So thank you so much for doing this podcast with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rama. Thank you, Vivek. It's a great pleasure to be here with both of you this morning. So look forward to the day. Thank you.
Okay, so today we want to have a conversation with you on the topic self management, and specifically, what you had achieved in Morningstar. So maybe learning from those things so that it would help our audiences, listeners, and viewers to learn more about self-managing teams and self-managing organizations. So, to begin with, just for our listeners, would you like to share what has been your contribution to Morningstar, and how did you come up with this concept of self-management from Morningstar?
So I didn't come up with it. I don't take any credit for it. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time in 1990. I joined the core team of Morningstar. It was Chris Roofer, the founder, brought us together. We were working out of a tiny little farmhouse on a dusty canal bank here in Northern California. And I joined the team in February of 1990, I was a financial controller. And the rest of the team, about 23 people, were primarily technicians, electricians, mechanics, and quality assurance specialists. And we were working out of this little farmhouse to build this company. And we were constructing a large high-tech food processing factory just down the road. And one day, Chris came into the farmhouse and said, I'd like to have a meeting of colleagues and talk about organizational design. And we said, sure, of course. Yeah, let's have a meeting. So we met at night in a dusty construction trailer out on the job site. And we sat around in a circle on steel folding chairs. And Chris handed out a document called the MorningStar Team Principles. And the principles boiled down to two things. First principle was that people shouldn't use force or coercion against other human beings. And of course, that's a principle of law everywhere in the world. Every law against assault and battery and theft and burglary and all the rest is based on that principle. And the second principle was that people should keep the commitments they make to each other, which is the foundation of contract law and civil law all around the world. And so we discussed and debated the merits of these principles for a couple of hours. And at the end of the evening, we just realized that we had no objections to these two core principles. They were foundational, self-evident principles. And so we adopted them as pretty much the entire governance of the enterprise. And when we filed out of that trailer in early 1990, we, at that moment, became a self-managed enterprise. So I take no credit, zero credit for coming up with the idea or having anything to do other than participating in that group discussion on the night, that night in March of 1990. But at that moment, as we became a self-managed organization, we had a lot of work to do. So we had thousands, tens of thousands of acres, hectares of tomatoes coming up out of the ground. We had to hire hundreds of people to operate the factory. We had vital equipment arriving on ocean cargo freighters out in the Atlantic Ocean, waiting to go through the Panama Canal. And we had hundreds of contractors on the job site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, constructing and fabricating and welding and pulling wire and all the rest. But finally, on July 16th of 1990, we turned on the factory and produced 90 million pounds. I think that's about 45 million kilograms of industrial tomato concentrate for the world market. Changed the cost structure of our entire industry virtually overnight, and did it without a single human boss. No bosses, no managers, no supervisors, no vice presidents, no titles, zero command authority, simply based on the power of the two principles. Don't use force and keep commitments, the most fundamental principles of law in the world, and a self-managed enterprise. So no credit for the idea. That was Chris Rufer's idea, our founder, but in terms of applying those principles to business, but definitely was privileged and honored to be there at the origin and be able to share this story all across the USA and all around the world. So that's my work as of today.
Yeah. Thanks, Doug, for sharing that quick background about how this all started, or maybe how Morningstar basically went into uh, addressing this. And definitely, you mentioned those two basic principles. One is, as a team, we are committed to each other, and second one is, we are not forcing anyone to do certain things. And also the other thing, obviously you mentioned, is there was no one reporting to anyone in terms of the hierarchy that we have in as a as an organization. Obviously, uh, we have worked with different organizations, and each of the organizations we have seen definitely there is a person that I report to, and that person reports to someone else in a certain hierarchy. But in this particular situation that you spoke about, do you think, I mean, is it really possible to have a culture over here, I mean, of trust and accountability through, particularly in self-managing teams, in an absence of, a typical hierarchical way of operating?
Yes, I think it's possible. I think Morningstar's experience proves that. And it's not just self-managing teams, it's self-managing individuals working in self-managing teams in a fully self-managing organization. But it starts with the individual and embracing those two core principles of individual accountability and freedom. So it's absolutely possible. Um, uh, do current business leaders have the courage to embrace these principles in terms of organizational design? Some do. There are great examples other than Morningstar all around the world, but it's absolutely possible. And bureaucracy is not free. Bureaucracy has huge direct and indirect costs. Gary Hamel and Mikhail Zanini have estimated that the cost of excess bureaucracy in the U.S. alone is about $3 trillion a year. That's 1/7 or 1/8 of the entire U.S. economy. And if you extrapolate that worldwide, the costs are absolutely staggering. And it's not just an economic and financial cost, it's a moral cost because we're literally wasting people's lives performing work that doesn't matter. So, yes, it's possible, and there are very important reasons to consider embracing those possibilities as well.
Oh wow, that's so interesting to see. I mean, honestly, if I have to speak from outside of, say, Morningstar setup or maybe outside world, it literally seems like too good to be true kind of a thing, because when we say that we are operating without any traditional hierarchy, it's like, I mean, there are many things. I mean, people think that how do we do that and how do we approach that? Is it even possible? Because we are so much tied up in these traditional ways of reporting or hierarchy. It, I mean, literally almost seems like too good to be true. I mean, definitely, I would want to be part of such organization where there is no hierarchy and all those things. And talking about, say, self-managing implementation in Morningstar, right? So while obviously while doing research for this topic, we also came across something about colleague letter of understanding, that is CLOU, function as a tool for self-managing management at Morningstar. So would you like to share some insights about the same? What is that CLOU all about?
So I didn't quite understand the last part of the question, Ramya. What is it that you're wanting me to comment on?
Yeah. So I read about colleague letter of understanding, which functions as a tool for self-management at Morningstar. So can you talk about what that CLOU is all about, and how does that function as a tool for self-management?
Thank you. So the CLOU, usually called the CLOU, it stands for a colleague letter of understanding. It's an instrument that represents, memorializes agreements by and between peers. Agreements are composed of commitments, and commitments, as we talked earlier, are one of the two foundational principles of human interaction. So, the colleague letter of understanding memorializes long-term, continuous, recurring commitments by and between peers in the organization. It starts with, it's really about the who, what, why, when, where, and how of work. And it's also about long-term commitments to the mission, vision, values, and principles of the enterprise. So people come to work, they are working in a particular role, they're relating to certain people who work side by side with them in the same or similar roles. And so they form relationships and they forge these agreements with their closest working peers. Most people connect to between 7 and 12 other peers, and these are usually peers in their own business units or people who are just upstream or downstream in the value chain of value creation in the enterprise. But they form these agreements and they consensus around their personal commercial mission, which is their purpose, their why. Why do you come to work here every day? What does excellence look like in your role? How does what you do support the mission, vision, values, and principles of MorningStar? And so they come up with a personal commercial mission that makes sense for themselves and for their fellow colleagues. Then they identify the services for which they agree to be fully accountable. So what are those services specifically? Those are the content of one's work, one's role. Are you the accounts payable leader and you're creating checks for vendors every week? Or are you a production specialist and responsible for filling containers? Are you a distribution leader and packing rail cars for customers? Are you producing financial statements? What exactly are the services you're providing to your internal and external customers? And we recognize that those services incorporate a high degree of management because everyone's a manager. It's not that there are no managers, it's that every single person in the enterprise is a manager. And management per se is not rocket science. It's planning, organizing, controlling, selecting, and coordinating. And we all do those things in our own personal lives all the time. So nobody needs a boss to tell them who to date, who to marry, what to do for a living, whether to start a podcast, sign a contract with Spotify, or anything else. We all make these decisions on our own without a boss. And so everyone's a manager. These services incorporate elements of management. So mechanics are busy. They're involved in hiring personnel. They're involved in strategy for their areas. They're involved in budgeting. Some of these mechanics at MorningStar are personally responsible for 15 to $20 million worth of equipment. And that's a lot of responsibility. So they're performing services, they're managing, those ideas are memorialized in the colleague letter of understanding. And who are they connected to? 7 to 12 fellow colleagues, could be more, could be less. People have freedom and autonomy to decide who to connect to. And then how do they measure performance? Because in a self-managed enterprise, you don't have a boss walking around telling you if you're doing a good job or not. You have to tell yourself. And the way people do that is by identifying what we call stepping stones at MorningStar. And they're called stepping stones instead of OKRs or KPIs or metrics because they're considered stepping stones toward perfection. So at Morningstar, people benchmark perfection. They don't necessarily benchmark other companies or other industries or sectors. They benchmark perfection. So perfection for a cost metric is 0. Perfection for an efficiency metric is 100%. Perfection for a quality metric is 0 defects. And the reason that they benchmark perfection is that that unlocks blue sky innovation thinking on the part of everyone who's a self-manager in the entire enterprise. And so the who, what, why, when and where, how many hours a week, where do I perform my services, etc. Where do I work, which factory, which business unit, those things. What resources do I require? What are my long-term goals, short-term goals? Those kinds of elements are identified. And of course, we ask people to subscribe and adhere to and embrace the colleague principles, the two fundamental principles we just mentioned. Those principles are actually the most fundamental principles of human interaction. They are to human beings what gravity is to physics. Imagine a world where everyone embraced the principle of not using force. We wouldn't need armies or navies or police or locks on our doors. And of course, that's not reality. We understand that. That's not realistic, but that's not really the point. The point is the closer we approach that ideal state, the better off we are as human beings, and the more space we open up for human happiness and harmony and teamwork and high performance and happiness, all the good things of life. Imagine a world where everyone kept their commitments. Every single person did what they said they were going to do 100% of the time. Would be an amazing world. And yes, we know that's not reality, but that's not the point. The point is the closer we get to that, the better off we are as human beings. So that's kind of the overview of the colleague letter of understanding and some of the philosophy and reasoning behind the different pieces of that. But those agreements are forged freely between self-managed individuals. And I think I may have somewhere a picture of
Mm-hmm.
this is the org chart of Morningstar. So there's no up or
Wow.
down, east or west, north or south, top or bottom. If this were a time lapse movie, it would be in constant motion as people
Mm-hmm.
freely negotiate and renegotiate their colleague letters of understanding. But
Oh, wow.
this is the digital representation of the connections between colleagues as memorialized in their colleague letters of understanding. So that's my spiel on the CLOU.
Mhm. Yeah, that image was something like a complicated network of loops from one place to end, and it would be difficult to identify which one end will meet the other end. So on that part, uh, I mean, maybe I'm just trying to understand or trying to dig in or get an input from you is if as a leader or as a coach, I am getting into a team or into an organization which is well, I mean, in terms of strongly into a place where it's more of a command and control kind of a situation. And if I, as a coach or as a leader, if I want to, get everyone from that way of operating to more of, realizing that self-managing can work in this setup, how do you think what should be the starting point for this person to begin from? Maybe any quick things on that.
Well, I can share some ideas that I've developed over the years with others. Um, yeah, the leader has to have at least enough willingness and courage to embrace the idea of exploring different ways of
Mm-hmm.
working. If you don't have that, how do you even start, right? If you have leaders that are fully invested in clinging to power, in sustaining the power of and structure of the hierarchy, how would you ever make progress with that? That would be a lot of wasted energy, I would think. But if you have a leader that's willing to explore, then there are some great ways to explore. And I love to point people to liberating structures. So there are lots of open social technologies available that facilitators can use to crack open the rigidity of and brittleness of an existing hierarchy and open up voices that may have been uh, reticent to speak up in the past. All kinds of social technologies, open space, World Cafe, Rod Collins is an expert in some of these. And so if a leader is open to it, I would consider putting all the top leaders and influencers in an organization into a large obea of some kind where they are invited, not compelled, but invited by the leader to participate in some of these open social technologies and theorize and explore different ways of working that are specifically designed to solve problems in their own organizational context. And we'd probably have some open space and World Cafe and coaching and assessments. And I would want to, at some point, brainstorm experiments, pilots and experiments for which people can take full accountability to initiate, resource, monitor, and report out the success or failure of, so that we start to build kind of an experimental mindset, an experimental culture, and then launch those, prioritize them, resource them, and launch them, and let people learn, and then share the learning from those experiments and pilots. Would then go on to crowdsource additional experiments and pilots from the larger organization, if there is a larger organization, and kind of create a sort of a never-ending perpetual cycle of learning and experimentation. And then infuse that with, you could have a book club, you could have lots of different approaches toward learning and shared learning. But, how do you transition from an existing brittle hierarchy to an open, self-managed enterprise, especially one like MorningStar that's radically different? I think you have to do it experimentally and by creating a learning organization, as Peter Senge documented so well.
Wow, that's amazing. Those are some amazing points, I would say. I mean, the key over here is maybe experimentation and learning from the experimentations, and encouraging teams to experiment, share that learnings, and then see, I mean, what is it better ways of working over here, and what works for us, and I mean, what is that we need to improve on. So this is what I understood. And what uh, struck me over here is you talked about maybe accountabilities, right? So maybe just I would want to say understand, how do we balance between freedom and responsibility within the managed organization?
Yes, so balancing is the first job of leadership. My dear best friend is Peter Kestenbaum. Peter's going to be 96 years old in April,
Oh.
and he is the author of the book. I don't have it right at hand, but he's the author with Peter Block of the book Freedom and Accountability at Work. And so
Wow.
they've explored at a philosophical level, at a granular level, they have explored the deep need to balance those two poles, freedom and accountability. Um, Managing and balancing polarities is the number one job of all leaders, as Peter would say. Um, but there are lots of polarities in organizations and in business. So we must balance short term and long term, objective and subjective, innovation and execution. The list is endless. So the job of leaders is to spot those polarities, identify them, and then balance them. And the balancing is about optimizing the benefits of each pole on a given polarity and minimizing the costs. And so for innovation versus execution, for example, if a company
Mm-hmm.
focuses too strongly on innovation, they may neglect their customers and lose market share. If they focus
Absolutely.
too closely on execution, they may be surpassed by the competition.
Yes.
So it's an inescapable fact that we must balance these polarities at all times. And so that's the number one job. Freedom and accountability is a big one. Of course, individuals differ. Um, Levels of integrity differ. Every company has mishires. They hire some of the wrong people. It's impossible to be 100% accurate in hiring. So um, it's about when people spot accountability failures, broken commitments. It's incumbent on individuals to have conversations, direct conversations with those people, and get those corrected. If people are using force inappropriately, or coercion, or exercising authority unilaterally that they don't possess, then it's important to identify that and have those difficult conversations. So those kind of conversations are like little retro rockets on a spaceship that sort of keep people aligned and on course. Little course corrections. Those conversations need to take place all the time. And in that diagram I showed you, um, people
Mm-hmm.
make requests of each other all the time. It's a nonstop process. Every day, hundreds and thousands of those conversations take place. It could be requests for change. It could be very simple requests. Could you hand me a report on Tuesday? That could be very serious requests. Could you culminate your services to the enterprise? But everything's based on request and response because no one has command authority and no one can tell another person what to do. So we make requests, and that's how commitments are formed. So another great leader is Fernando Flores, Chile's young finance minister, who identified the structure of the language and the life cycle of commitment making and commitment keeping. And there is structure to that. And it's about having mutual understanding of the definition of done. What does it mean for a commitment to be completed? And then having check-ins to identify when it's been fulfilled. And so commitment making is crucial to success in a self-managed enterprise. And so, I showed you that spider web diagram. This
Mm-hmm.
is very much like a spider web, and so
Yeah.
spider silk is 5 times stronger than steel by weight. So this is a very,
Wow.
very robust, very strong, very powerful organizational structure. It's super resilient. If a few people just leave, it doesn't matter. Roles and responsibilities are allocated and reallocated almost automatically. And so this is a very powerful organizational structure to support those two core principles of no force and accountability. And it allows us to balance polarities because everyone is a leader. Every single person in this node, a network of nodes, is a leader and has the opportunity and freedom to lead as much as they are able and willing to lead. And so leadership is everywhere. Expertise is everywhere. Professionals are everywhere. And they are all balancing these polarities and managing these balances all the time.
Wow. So, I mean, while you were talking about all these things, so I was very curious to maybe know. I wonder, I mean, which framework you would be using, or if at all you're using any framework, any particular framework to maybe run this entire thing, or maybe deliver value, or maybe produce something. So, were you kind of using any particular framework, or maybe it was just a mix of certain things from here and there? So, one thing you spoke about is the definition of them. So, that is one thing maybe that you are using, and you also have like two underlining principles within Morningstar that you are operating on. So apart from these things, were you using any framework as such, or maybe any other principles, or maybe any agile ways of working, or maybe traditional ways of working, anything that you are following?
Well, Morningstar is in the process of developing a decision-making framework, which I think will
Mm-hmm.
be very helpful. Um, so for example, the Walt Disney Company has historically had a framework that involves um, safety first. Safety always comes first, and then courtesy, and then putting on a great show, and then something else. And or efficiency is probably the last thing. So safety, courtesy, show, and efficiency. So Morningstar is in the process of developing a decision-making framework. I think that's going to be quite helpful.
Wow.
And yeah, a guy named Chuck Salvo, the former Disney Institute leader, is helping with that. But as far as frameworks, the two core principles are pretty much the governance of the enterprise,
Mhm.
and the CLOU, the colleague letter of understanding, is the instrument by which we forge long-term connections. Um, we talk about the Kestenbaum leadership diamond. I suppose that's a framework. So, what does leadership look like in a self-managed enterprise where everyone is free to be a leader? And it's a very simple framework. It's about courage. Leadership starts with courage,
Absolutely.
because, as Aristotle said, courage is the leadership attribute that makes all other leadership attributes possible.
Yeah.
So we start with courage, and then we have ethics. Courage is about your own inner will, your own inner strength, your own inner perseverance, your willingness to have difficult conversations, to hold others accountable, to do all those things that need to be done. But that's balance. That has a polarity. And the polarity of courage and inner strength is ethics, which is about other people. Ethics is about caring, kindness, compassion, nurturing, support, empathy, and encouragement. Well, that's important because in a self-managed enterprise, and in fact, in every enterprise, we all deal with intersubjectivity. We all have to relate to other people and get things done. That's the whole purpose of a team. It's about working
Correct.
together. Yeah, and so, but ethics is also about right and wrong. It's also got the component of right and wrong. So we don't lie, cheat, and steal, and we tell the truth, and we do our best, and we do all those things. So courage is balanced with ethics, the inner self, the self that is intersubjective. But then we have another pole on Kestenbaum's leadership diamond, and that pole has to do with reality. So the left side of his diamond is reality. We have to be realistic. We have to understand the terrain upon which we're operating. We have to know our own emotional interstate. We have to read the room and understand the emotional states of the people with whom we work. We have to understand our constraints. What are our budgetary constraints, our material constraints, resource constraints? We also have to know what the opportunities are. So what are the innovation possibilities and the opportunities and market possibilities that we have as individuals and leaders of organizations? So it's about being very, very real and knowing the terrain, and that's about the current state. But then that has a pole as well, the polarity to reality, which is current state is a vision of the future. So what
Wow.
is the possibility? What is the possibility into which I, as a leader, can invite, not impose, but invite people to follow me on a journey toward? What does that vision look like? What is my desired future state? And so we're balancing inner, outer, courage, ethics, along with reality, current state, and vision, future state.
Future.
And so the Kestenbaum Leadership Diamond, and the end result of that, well, I should say a couple more things. One is that the fuel for courage, the gasoline for courage, is anxiety. And as human beings, we all feel anxiety. So, as Aristotle said, the way to use anxiety is to use it to fuel courage and not allow anxiety to paralyze us. So we use that kind of inner voice that makes us a little bit uneasy to propel us to do the difficult things and take on the difficult tasks and step into the role of courage. We also have free will. So everyone has free will. We know we have free will because the three of us made a mutual decision to meet here together at this time on this platform, and we could have chosen to do something else today, but we chose to be here.
Right.
So everyone has free will. We recognize that we're free to choose our own destinies, our own workplaces, etc. Um, and we have this idea of polarity that I've already talked about, and we have the idea of transcendental language, what Peter Kestenbaum calls transcendentalia. And that is this idea of let's keep in mind higher things like mindfulness and consciousness and meaning and purpose. And let's keep those things in mind at all times so that we kind of elevate the conversations that we have beyond the here and now and beyond KPIs and behind, this project didn't work or whatever, and sales this month and all those kinds of things. Let's always keep our vision elevated so we're looking toward a greater future. And the end result of all this leadership diamond framework is the possibility of greatness. So, greatness is inherently good. We should all want to be great. We should want the
Wow.
people with whom we work to be great. We should want our family member, our children. We should want those people to be great because what's the opposite of greatness? The opposite of greatness is mediocrity. Who wants that for themselves
Correct.
or anyone else with whom they relate? So we are pursuing greatness through the framework of the leadership diamond. And I guess the only other framework that we lock into is the idea of the commitment making cycle or Fernando Flores. It really starts with a request or an offer of help. It goes to negotiating what Fernando called conditions of satisfaction, the definition of done in the Agile software world, then forming an agreement, a commitment. Commitments are sacred promises. So if one can't fulfill a commitment, then it's really about renegotiating the commitment, and that's about conscious leadership. And it goes straight to trust, integrity. The definition of integrity is the degree to which one fulfills commitments, and you need that for trust. And trust-based organizations are provably higher performing than untrustworthy organizations. So the commitment cycle, the leadership diamond, the two core principles, we're working on a decision-making framework. There are probably other things out there. The beauty of self-management is that you can borrow whatever makes sense from
Right.
the outside world. If we want to use Six Sigma, if we want to use Kanban or Lean or business process management, we can use any tool, technique, assessment, instrument, approach, methodology, framework, anything we want to use at any time.
Wow, that's wonderful. So many inputs or so many wonderful points from this conversation. But I would just like to go back to a previous conversation where Ramya was talking about, how to balance the freedom that, the self-management brings in. And you spoke about one thing, that is, one is innovation and one is the execution part, the polarity or the two different poles. Uh, this again becomes a challenge while we are working with teams or organizations. And when we talk about self-managing, giving them the autonomy to decide for themselves, do you think that that again becomes a challenge where the direction of the teams or the organizations might become a uh, different things for them to look into? And how do you think that bringing them alignment of what we are looking at a given point of time, how do we bring that, how do we think that can be addressed in the right way?
Right. So the alignment question is a huge question, and it's about coordination. So we talk at Morningstar about decision rights, who owns which decisions, and how do you decide, how do you make certain decisions, right? So there are different classes of decisions. So one class is, high level, strategic decisions, the kind of decisions that could make or break an enterprise. And in most organizations, those are owned by a board of directors or CEO or a combination. And then everything else is an operational or managerial decision. And so how do you make those decisions? So at Morningstar, those decision rights are negotiable. So in a particular business unit, a production business unit, for example, um, often decision making is owned by people with the most expertise to make a decision. But sometimes those decisions are agreed upon as unilateral decisions because you're the expert. Joe, you make the decision every time. Sometimes they are consensus group decisions. Just depends on the decision. But how you make decisions is really, really crucial. We're working that out in teams. I play a game called Decision Rights Poker. So I've got like a deck of cards, and I play. I put people in teams, and we play decision rights poker. So we identify the decisions they have to make in their team, and then what's the best way to make a decision. And often we find that for a given decision on a team of seven, we might have seven different approaches to making the same decision. So then we have to work
Wow.
through that, and okay, let's have some conversation here and see if we can achieve a meeting of the minds on how to make this particular decision. So that's important. But then you have the idea that you mentioned, Vivek, of coordination between teams and alignment around perhaps a common strategy. So traditionally, the coordination mechanisms have been meetings, right? Business meetings. And we know that business meetings are very, very expensive. Costs in the US here range from $300 to $500 per participant per hour of meeting time.
Wow.
Very, very expensive. They often result in misunderstandings. They often suppress the voices of introverts. There are lots of costs and challenges with meetings. And yet that's been the primary social technology that we've used to align people around different ideas and strategies. So um, I can tell you there is technology coming along that has a potential to transcend the need for traditional meetings, which is very exciting. Um, Often, large organizations will create federations. So they'll create representative teams, and they'll send each separate team will send a delegate to the federation meeting and try to achieve some mutual understanding and coordination at that level. But it is a big, huge challenge. Every organization has to solve that challenge in a way that makes sense for its own culture and its own context. And then, of course, when you're a global organization spread across multiple time zones, you have all kinds of challenges beyond just the time of day. It's, countries have different holidays, for example, or different days off, and all kinds of things are going on. So it is a huge challenge. It is being worked on at the technological level. But the federation model is typical. And I don't think there's one silver bullet, as they say. There's not one perfect answer to the coordination problem. We just have to recognize it and do the best we can in the context in which we're operating.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I like the point that you mentioned that there is no silver bullet to solve coordination problems. We'll have to figure out. I mean, it also depends upon the people involved. It also depends upon what we are trying to solve, what problems we are trying to solve, and where are we in terms of reaching towards a solution, right? I mean, yes, I agree upon that. So, what also, I mean, got me curious over here is, I mean, you already mentioned that in Morningstar, the OKRs are called as MBOs, right? So, if we have to say measure the success of self-managing teams, so how we measure the success of this self-management teams or maybe the organizations in general?
Yeah, so I think the measures are pretty straightforward and simple at Morningstar. Continuous measures of trust. As we
Mhm.
talked earlier, that's a huge factor in business performance, and we think it's really important to the success of self-management. Any organization can measure trust. It doesn't have to be a self-managed organization, but we think it's very important. And the instrument is Morningstar is the O factor from Paul Zak, who's a neuroeconomist in Southern California. So we measure that. We measure happiness, um, clearly measure performance at the very granular individual level, the team level, and of course at the enterprise level. And then Morningstar has been pretty serious about tracking commitments. And commitment making, commitment keeping is one of the two core principles I mentioned earlier. And it's fundamental to success. It really is. Um, Commitments are more than good things to do. They have measurable economic and financial consequences. So if you have a couple of stores, one store is 100% reliable, the other store is 90% reliable. The store that's 90% reliable, I mean, that sounds pretty good, 90%, but they'd have to discount their products almost 25% to be competitive with a store that's
Wow.
100% reliable, because reliability matters for individuals and for organizations. So tracking commitments is very, very important. Um, David Arella, actually a few years ago, designed a software called Commit Keeper so that companies can track their commitments online. And I think it uses a color scheme like red, yellow, green to, green is on track, yellow is flashing a warning sign, red is a failed commitment. And commitment keeping is directly correlated with business success and performance. So tracking commitments is something that I'd encourage every organization to do. It's just a good thing to do.
Mm. Uh, so since we are talking about commitment, and nowadays everyone is too much curious or too much into determining the progress in terms of how a particular team or what we are doing in terms of how predictable we are, or how we are creating value, and in terms of determining the value, we get into at a very granular level of, okay, this is how the team's performance is and all that. So when we're talking about commitment, I hope you are referring to what as a team or what as an organization we have committed to, get things done from a end user point of view, and not as into getting into the granular layer of, okay, by the end of the sprint or by end of the duration, we are going to deliver so much of story points, right? I mean, I hope that is what you were trying to communicate to, right?
Well, commitments are promises.
Yes,
So
yes.
commitments are, commitments fall into different categories. So there are long-term, ongoing, continuous, recurring commitments. Those are the kinds of commitments we memorialize in a colleague letter of understanding. So those are, I am committed to adhere to the colleague principles, for example. I am committed to using the conflict resolution process that MorningStar has adopted. I'm committed to performing my personal commercial mission. I'm committed to performing these services. Those are promises, ongoing, recurring promises on which people can count. But then there are short-term commitments. There are the kinds of commitments. I see someone in the hallway. I say, can you provide a sales report by 3 o'clock tomorrow for the meeting? The person says yes, they can, or no, they can't. If they say yes, we have a commitment. I should be able to rely 100% on that promise. And then there are trivial commitments. That nobody documents. So long-term, recurring, short-term. The short-term commitments are just as important as the long-term commitments. They're just as important. People should be able to rely on those 100%. If somebody makes a promise, they need to keep the promise, or they need to renegotiate the commitment. And then to the point of trust, if someone breaks a commitment, I don't want to ask them, why did you break the commitment? I want to say, why didn't you tell me you were going to not be able to perform that commitment? Because now I've elevated
Exactly.
the discussion from the level of a transaction to the level of trust. How are we going to work together when you make promises you don't keep?
Wow.
Very, very
So
important.
it's almost like saying that okay, it's okay, we will fail, but let us know that we'll fail early. So informing that we'll fail early. I mean, instead of saying that asking or why didn't you fulfill this commitment, but then why didn't you inform early so that we could have done something about it. So is the understanding right, maybe?
Yeah, if someone has made a promise to another person, they own the responsibility of telling that person if something has come up that will prevent them from fulfilling their promise. That is an absolute non-negotiable. They owe that courtesy to the person to whom they owe the promise. And that's why commitment making is so serious. Why it's one of the two fundamental principles of human interaction. Again, imagine a world where everyone did what they said they were going to do 100% of the time. What an amazing world that would be to live in. Well,
Absolutely.
we have what we
Yes.
have, but we can also do better. Right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So maybe the last question for today is if you have to say summarize some of the lessons that other organizations can learn from Morningstar's experience with self-management, what would those be?
So I will be publishing in the next couple of days a story from India about a friend
Hmm.
of mine named Nand Kishore Chowdhury. He's the founder of
Okay.
Jaipur rugs. Uh, Nand
Oh,
is no Nand is known around the world as the Gandhi of the textile industry because he has taken 40,000 women from some of the poorest villages in
hmm,
India and allowed them to create and design their own luxury, high-end artistic carpets. He calls it art that you can walk on. And these women have elevated their lives. They're able to educate their children. They're able to lead much better lives without middlemen taking profits. Um, he has changed the lives of these people all across India because he's used the power of self-management to give them dignity, a voice, and a decision-making power. Many of them are going on design trips to Europe where they're picking up design awards. They're delivering keynote speeches at conferences. He's changed the lives of tens of thousands of people in India through the power of self-management. So that is a beautiful example. I was privileged to talk to Nand just a couple of weeks ago on a Zoom call, and absolutely love him. And he says he does it because out of love. That's why he's created this amazing self-managed organization. And these carpets are high-end luxury items. So he's connecting some of the poorest people in the world with some of the richest people in the world, and really creating a new reality right there in Jaipur, India. So great example, one that I love a lot. So probably can
Wow.
end with that one.
Yes, I mean, I we do know about Jaipur rugs, and it's a very famous brand here in India. And I mean, it's very interesting and fascinating to know that they operate on self-management principles or ways of working. We are eager to read about your article, what you write, and learn from that article and implement maybe from that story. If we can implement even few things, I think that would be a better ways of working in any organization. I feel because we know, as you rightly mentioned, that the people involved in making that Jaipur rugs are very traditional people and women from very remote places, and there's a lot of hard work that they put in. I mean, when we also maybe look at their work, there are videos of women from remote places working hard and weaving those carpet using their own hands. So yes, that would be really an interesting would be a interesting read from you. We would be waiting for that article from you to publish, and then we would want to learn from that the self management principles in depth. And it was a amazing conversation, Doug, with you. There were so many light bulb moments for me in this conversation, and it really got me thinking. I mean, if we really want to operate just on two principles and make possible the impossible one, it would be a great a learning space for every one of us, be it leaders or be it people in the organizations or be it higher ups or whoever. It would be an amazing space to be at. So thank you so much for sharing such a wonderful insights from your experience. And it is very humble of you to say that you don't take any credit of whatever things that have been done in Morningstar. We know your contribution, and we also know what you do, and we know that you have books published on this concept. So it is really humble of you to say that there is no you don't take a credit of it. You should be taking credit of whatever you have done. Definitely, no one can take away from you all those things. And yes, thank you so much for doing this today and spending time out and spending early morning hours with us. It's a great honor and pleasure to have you on our show. Thank you so much for coming over and doing this with us, Doug.
Thank you, Ramna. I appreciate that very much. And Vivek, thanks very much. Great questions. Love meeting you guys. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you so much for watching this episode patiently till the end. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll meet you again in the next episode. Till then, if you like our podcast show, then do like, share, subscribe, and let us know your feedback in the comment section. You can also listen to the episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Audible. Thank you.